What's up, everybody? Everyone watching this right now woke up in a brand new country today. It's time for Stir Crazy. I think this is episode 45, if I'm not mistaken. Blacked Out. It's brought to you by the Real News Network. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Everyone, I know you had to have seen the pictures coming from not just around the way in Washington, D.C., but across cities all across this nation where curfews were instituted. People's right to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of protest were just snatched out from under them by the barrel of rubber bullets, guns, and paint canisters, and tear gas, and police dressed like RoboCops. The shit was crazy. We're going to take a look at some of the footage that happened in Washington, D.C. when peaceful protesters were fired upon with tear gas canisters, or should I say gas canisters. It has not yet been confirmed that it was tear gas. However, that's almost inconsequential because the protests were not peaceful, but they cleared the square at Lafayette Park so Trump could make his way to St. John's Episcopal Church for a very questionable photo op. We're going to get into all that. In addition, we're going to just talk about what's been going on with the case and the murder case of George Floyd, the catalyst, really, of a lot of the uprisings that we've been seeing that started initially in Minneapolis and spread to other places, to include other people who have been victims of police violence, brutality, and murder. And there have been people killed still by police, some of which have been in these protests. We're going to lift up a couple of their names. And please let us know if there's anything that we're missing out on, an incident that is happening where you are that maybe has not made the national news. You can always email us, stircrazy@therealnews.com. Well, it's time to bring in our fantastic panel. And of course, you guys in the comments and in the chat, you guys are our panelists too. So keep it live. Don't be too rowdy. We know how y'all like to get in the chat. But definitely send us your comments and your questions, okay? So I'd like to bring in our great panel. Some of these folks you know, some of these folks you don't know. My man, my guy, Richard Snow is joining us today. Richard is the host of the Smart Start podcast. It's all about bringing information and highlighting minority business owners. And of course, you know, Rich has a very special perspective on what the status of this economy is, especially what it means to small business owners, especially what it means to minority business owners out here as we are in the midst of this economic recession, possibly Great Depression. Of course, we like to welcome a friend to the Stir Crazy gang, Lisa Snowden-McCray. She is our executive producer here at The Real News. McCray, did I do it again, Lisa? Why? Look, did you hear me? I said McCoy with such authority, girl. I knew it was McCoy. I knew it. Lisa Snowden-McCray. McCray. I'm gonna say this woman's name correct. I promise. Oh my gosh. And of course, Stephen Janis. He's our investigative reporter here and co-host of the Police Accountability Report at the Real News panel. We want to welcome you all in these very sombering times that we live in. For all intents and purposes, America has been put under martial law. I mean, there is a curfew in effect for a majority of U.S. cities. And we're going to take a quick look here at the events leading up to police clearing the area right in front of the White House at Lafayette Park around this time yesterday in advance of a 7 p.m. curfew that was put into place by Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser. Now, mind you, before you watch this video, most of the people that were out there demonstrating, number one, had no idea about the curfew, and number two, were not in violation of the curfew because it was not quite yet 7 o'clock. So this footage that we're about to see, it was shot by Reuters Media, and it's pretty stunning. Let's take a look.
You Wow.
I mean, just a stunning scene there out in front of the White House yesterday as peaceful protesters. I mean, they were angry. They were chanting at the police, "You are the threat." And clearly the protesters were correct because just a few short moments later, they had their peaceful protests, legal protests, completely disrupted by police. And for apparently this reason, let's take that shot of Donald Trump, the president of the United States, walking from the White House to stand in front of St. John's Church, St. John's Episcopal Church, which had sustained some damages the previous night during some of the uprisings where the basement had been burned. And look at what we're looking at here, folks. I mean, I want all of our panelists to sort of look at this sort of display here. You know, the conversation earlier had my brain thinking in this direction. What are we looking at here? Where Donald Trump standing solo in front of this Episcopalian church, this church of the presidents, so to speak. Many presidents attend this church before inaugurations. A story that I saw earlier showed you know, how Abraham Lincoln used to go to this church during the Civil War. Now, Trump's not saying a whole lot, so that's why I don't have a problem talking over this, Bama, because y'all know Trump ain't saying a goddamn thing. But at the same time, you know, he's standing there with the Bible in his right hand. As I was watching this spectacle live panel, I just knew the Bible was going to catch on fire. I was just waiting for the Bible just to go up in flames in his hand. But before we saw that display, that photo op at the church, by the way, the church itself, very unhappy with how Donald Trump used their holy sanctuary as a prop, so to speak. He gave this chilling speech from the Rose Garden. Let's have a listen.
This is our mission, and we will succeed. 100%, we will succeed. Our country always wins. That is why I am taking immediate presidential action to stop the violence and restore security and safety in America. I am mobilizing all available federal resources, civilian and military, to stop the rioting and looting, to end the destruction and arson, and to protect the rights of law-abiding Americans, including your Second Amendment rights. Therefore, the following measures are going into effect immediately. First, we are ending the riots and lawlessness that has spread throughout our country. We will end it now. Today, I have strongly recommended to every governor, the National Guard in sufficient numbers, that we deploy the streets. Mayors and governors must establish an overwhelming law enforcement presence until the violence has been quelled. If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them. I am also taking swift and decisive action to protect our great capital, Washington, D.C. What happened in this city last night was a total disgrace. As we speak, I am dispatching thousands and thousands of heavily armed soldiers military personnel, and law enforcement officers to stop the rioting, looting, vandalism, assaults, and the wanton destruction of property.
There is so much to unpack out of that word salad of authoritarianism. Stephen Janis, I want to start with you because there's a lot of things we could pick out of what he just said in that brief clip. One of the things that jumped out to me was he wants to protect the Second Amendment right of citizens. So surely he's saying for protesters to show up and freely exercise their Second Amendment rights. Surely that's what the president meant. What do you think, Stephen?
Well, it's interesting because, we're dealing with protests over police violence, and he's answering with more violence and actually talking specifically referencing the Second Amendment. So instigating, in some sense, suggesting violence. And so it just shows the lack of imagination, political imagination, that's sort of wrought by this obsession with law enforcement and policing that we cover a lot in our show, that creates this sense that, the only solution we have, instead of perhaps talking about a commission on police reform or some sort of national policy or examination of what happened, what leads to so many deaths in law enforcement, he responds with violence and a Bible, which is almost like Stephen King-esque in its, aesthetics. So I think that, we're seeing what happens to an ideology that is immersed in this idea of policing as an instrument of state violence. And, I'm not really surprised, but it's interesting.
I mean, Lisa, something changed yesterday, right? Like the whole tenor of this whole thing, it was already tense and escalating, but then the president just put his foot firmly on the pedal and just mashed it all the way down and said, nope, we going all the way in, balls to the wall. I mean, just stunning all around from yesterday.
Yeah, the thing is that even though something's not clicking all the way with the president, the stuff that he does is calculated, and that none of that was a mistake. All of that, even there have been people online posting images, that image of him holding that Bible. There's a very similar image that exists of Hitler doing the same thing. So even those are signals to those people that he wants to kind of take over. I think I've said on the show before, there's interviews because Donald Trump has never found a camera and a microphone that he didn't like. So there's interviews that exist from decades ago where he was saying that it would be great to have a collapse of society because people like him will make out great. And if you look at the chaos that we're living right now and look at Wall Street, that's what's going on. So yeah, none of this stuff is accidental. The last thing I'll say to kind of like build on Stephen's point is like, if you were actually strong, if you were actually a good leader, you don't have to do these kind of things. You don't have to like disperse people and hurt people just to make this image. You don't have to, like, if you were actually a religious person, you don't need to hold a Bible. You don't have to walk around, with a copy of your religious text of choice and your religious symbol of choice because it's actually in you. So this is actually a very, very weak man, a very scared man who has basically all of the powers of our country at his fingertips, which is terrifying.
Richard, Lisa raises a good point. There was a lot of signaling, not only in that speech in the Rose Garden, but the whole, charade of clearing the protesters, walking alone, followed by his, phalanx of Jared and Ivanka and, all these other dipshits, Bill Barr, this sort of train of idiots, following behind the president. But at the same time, the very opening part of that particular clip that we just played, he said that we will succeed in our mission. America always wins. And I took away from that, white America always wins. I heard, well, what did you hear? And tell me about your take on what you just saw.
So Trump has always played the persona of the untouchable. And as we walk through this administration, his full term in office, we see that he's felt that he's been untouchable the whole entire time. So what better Hollywood drama would it be to walk through a street that's consumed with riot, and you walk through untouchable, then you sit in front of a church, because there's a conflict here of individuals within the administration using the playbook of church and comfort and trying to make him look like a uniter. But at the core of what he is violence begetting violence. He wants the martial law state. So you see that they're trying to play upon these two narratives, but you cannot. And now he's trying to create the Hollywood of walking through the streets untouched, because if you remember, prior to him having this conversation with the U.S., the news all said our president has retreated. Has he left the office? Has he done that? So you got to remember, he listens to the propaganda, and then he creates his playbook based upon that propaganda. So you're looking at somebody trying to impose the will of strength to the U.S., that he's untouchable, that he's not running. Then at the same time, standing in front of a church with a Bible, thinking that's the uniting portion of it, but wanting the violence of that a dictator wants. So there's this constant theme and conflict that has played out his whole time in office.
Yeah, it's pretty striking. And, Rich, I wanted to ask you specifically because, the first half of this year, most of it has been encompassed by this pandemic. And we know that there has been a massive influx of wealth going up to the top, 1%, 2%, 3%, where billionaires have been able to enrich themselves over $400 billion, since the start of this pandemic. Companies like Amazon and Walmart doing extremely well financially. And yet we have the striking contrast of long lines at food pantries and rent strikes because people can't make rent. With over 40 million people unemployed, unemployment numbers are reaching historical valleys that we have never such encountered. I mean, how does that play? I mean, shit is falling apart in the street, but Wall Street is rocking harder than ever.
Well, you have to look at it from a standpoint right now that the first initial Paycheck Protection Program stimulus was $350 billion. That initial $350 billion didn't have many provisions wrapped around it. So that's when you saw the Lakers, the larger chain or brands being able to take advantage of those funds. The Congress began to correct the structure, and the second round, so the first round, $350 billion, was depleted in about a week and a half. That second round, we're currently in the second round, there's still about $100 billion left within this second round, which the total was $320 billion. And the reason why is because there were more provisions laid out for the low to moderate income minorities, the independent contractors. So this is where, and where this divide is taking place, is that there's a lot of documentation required to not as much, but there's enough documentation that some small businesses administratively may not have the ability to complete the documentation, take advantage of the funds. They don't understand the forgiveness portion enough. So you're seeing that that's taking place where they don't want to take advantage of the funds because they're afraid that they may be required to pay it back and it will not become forgiven, because a 1% loan with an 18-month amortization can put some small businesses out of business. That's a large payment. So this disparity continues because of how it was designed within the initial guidelines. Now they're changing that. You have people like United States Congressman Dwight Evans, who is trying to usher in not the CARES Act, but the new act to amend the old law. So they're trying to extend out the term, instead of 1 year, 5 years. They're trying to allow you to use it more for just payroll. They're trying to get you to use it for also working capital, which a lot of businesses need right now. These cities are ravaged. If you walk through these cities, it delayed the opening. This rioting is delaying the opening. It's delaying the access to capital. It's delaying the small businesses being able to open up their doors and begin to welcome people in. The flatlining that we were doing through social distancing, that plan is pretty much out the window. They have to draw up a new plan of what that looks like. So this is all playing back into just not having that access, not truly understanding, and trying to wrap around how you play into these laws. So you're seeing a lot of this continuously take place and play out. And the fear, I'll tell you one thing, and this is interesting. If you play the propaganda of fear and you say on the news 24/7, minorities are constantly not receiving the access to capital, not receiving the funds, they're getting declined, so forth and so on, for the PPP loan. Then if I'm a minority and I'm already nervous about applying, and I think all minorities are being declined, then I lost before I even started. I'm not going to apply because I already have in my mind, based on the information that's been put out there, that I'm not going to receive these funds. When that's not the truth. There's opportunities out there. There's more funding out there. So I wish that more minorities, and I hope this platform gets more minorities to go in and take advantage of it, because there's a lot of people that need it, and they're completely walking away from the opportunity for the funds.
Well, listen, we have some comments from the comments. Steely Steve says UBI, Universal Basic Income, and Medicare for All could save us from going into an economic depression, but Congress refuses to represent us. Yes, everybody, where's Speaker Nancy Pelosi? She's chilling. Steely Steve also says Democrats all voted for the CARES Act. Remember that. And also, Trump says, we're still talking about the problems. What's the solution, people? Well, we're going to get there. Well, gang, let's all remember the reason why these uprisings even started in the first place. And that was the murder on videotape of George Floyd, the 46-year-old man who was killed for allegedly trying to pass a $20 bill by former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, who has been arrested now and charged with third-degree murder. I mean, what the fuck is third-degree murder? And a manslaughter charge as well. Stephen Janis, I know you and Taya Graham have been covering this ever since it broke on Police Accountability Report. And I wanted to play an excerpt from your report about what the medical examiner, their conclusions were, and the independent autopsy that was conducted by George Floyd's family. Let's take a listen.
The cause of death, in my opinion, is asphyxia due to compression of the neck, which, as Mr. Crump indicated, can interfere with blood flow and oxygen going to the brain.
We do have physical evidence that supports that there was pressure applied to his neck. And it's in this combination with the additional medical information that we have, including examination of all of the other organs that were available to us in making our determination of cause of death.
And his calling out, like Eric Garner, but also including calling out for his mother, who had been dead for 3 years. None of this caused a release of the pressure. And that is very disturbing.
Stephen, tell us who we just heard from and the difference between what the independent autopsy commissioned by the Floyd family discovered versus what the Hennepin County medical examiner discovered.
Well, that was an independent pathologist hired by the family to do an autopsy, because autopsies in police custody deaths are extremely problematic. The medical examiner usually issues, and I would say, we've covered a lot of cases where they issue, causes of death and circumstances that benefit the police. And in this case, you can see it in the distinction between the cause of death for the independent autopsy was, of course, positional asphyxiation, which means, compression on the body causing oxygen not to flow to the brain. But the Hennepin County medical examiner determined that the cause of death was partially police subdural or partial compressional, but also due to other causes like heart condition and drugs in his system, which is pretty common from public medical examiners who tend to throw things in there. And I think the reason they do it is to give police wiggle room in this case. They both said it was a homicide, which is simply, death caused by the hands of another. But those distinctions are very important. The family pathologist, the pathologist who was hired by the attorneys representing the family, said, there was no evidence of heart disease, and in no way did heart disease contribute. Meanwhile, the medical examiner for Hennepin County made heart disease a primary part of that, and we have seen that in other cases where the medical examiner, where someone will die under positional asphyxiation, where a police officer lays his body across or puts his knee on his back or something. And then the medical examiner will say, well, it was accidental, the person had heart disease. And I think this is a very important distinction to see, because this is why we have so many problems with policing, because you have this disagreement, I would say. But, really, if you watch the video, you had 3 officers on his back at some point. You had a compression on his neck. We talked to an independent medical forensic pathologist, Dr. Cyril Wick, and he said it was a classic case of positional asphyxiation. And I think what was interesting, he said, I can't believe police are still doing this, because it's well known that it take that long to kill somebody when you're sitting on their back, when you're putting your full body on their back. The lungs can't bring in oxygen and get it to the brain, and people die. And, many times I think there's plenty of evidence that medical examiners give police wiggle room in these cases. And I think that's what the Hennepin County medical examiner is trying to do in this case.
Lisa, the family and many others in the community are calling for an increase in the charges against Derek Chauvin, and obviously to charge the other 3 officers who were present when Mr. Floyd was murdered. But we know what a high standard that is. What prosecutors always say, it's so hard to prove intent, so they tend to lower the charges, I suppose, in hopes of getting a conviction. I mean, who can say what people's genuine motives or agendas are when it comes to these types of cases? But if it comes out that he is not charged additionally, is that going to be good enough, or should the community just accept? I mean, a murder charge is a murder charge. If he gets convicted, he will be a convicted murderer.
Crap, I don't even know. Well, actually, before I get into that, I do want to correct myself, because this is the real news, not the fake news. I said that there was an image online of Trump, and it was mirroring an image of Hitler. James, our social media guru, corrected me and said that was Photoshop. Just want to put that on the record. Everything else I said was right, though. For this, I think it's really important. I know me and you, Kim, we kind of have, we are united in our disdain for bougie Blacks. And I see a lot of bougies sometimes talking about kind of like poo-pooing the work that organizers do on the ground. Like maybe because they have fancier jobs, maybe even in law or politics, that those mean more. But like nothing happens without people doing direct action. So it's kind of what I think a lot of what will determine this case and whether this gentleman and his family get justice is a direct response to what's happening in the streets right now, and directly in response to 2 of the organizers that you've spoken to this week for the Real News. So like, I don't think that I can understate how important, like here in Baltimore, we know that part of the reason why we got that image of Marilyn Mosby on the steps declaring, she was bringing charges was because, for better or for worse, leaders were like, we can't keep having this in Baltimore. We can also argue about how successful that was, but I'm just saying, organizers know what they're doing when they're doing these actions, and I think those will really have a lot to do to see whether we actually get justice this time, or it's just kind of like business as usual in America.
Hey, Kim,
go ahead, Stephen.
Just really quickly, that when the attorney for the family during that same press conference said that because the police had checked for a pulse, Mr. Floyd, and there was no pulse, and they continued to exert downward pressure on his body, that was enough to meet the threshold of intent, and that he believed he should be charged with, first-degree murder. So I just wanted to add that his family is pushing for that based upon the forensic evidence and the examination of the pathologist.
Yeah, I mean, this is extremely concerning, because this is what, has kicked off this nationwide movement. Just the fact that this man's murder was, and his life was just so blatantly disregarded, his welfare, his well-being. He was advocating for himself, letting them know that he could not breathe. Strangers were advocating on his behalf, and other officers stood by and watched. And, Rich, we had a similar situation happen in Minnesota in the not so distant past with Philando Castile, whose girlfriend so courageously live streamed what was happening to him on Facebook after police shot him in front of his fiance and his child, simply because he disclosed himself to be a legal gun owner. And then all of a sudden the situation got tense, and cop got scared, shot and killed Philando Castile, and that cop was later acquitted. I mean, if we're seeing all this right now in the wake of George Floyd's murder, imagine what we would see if there are not convictions in this case. What is your take?
There's an absolute subconscious level of aggression as a black man towards black men, that we are first looked at as being extremely aggressive when we're approached by police. Me being a professional, I could tell you last year I was probably pulled over 15 times for no apparent reason.
Who pulled you over, Rich? Was it Philadelphia police? Who did it?
I mean, I can give you one in particular where I was double parked to pull groceries out of my car, and I was approached by the cops. I didn't think they were coming towards me, and I said, "Are you looking for me?" They said yes. And lo and behold, they're giving me a ticket for double park for taking groceries in my house. And when I say, I hope there's something you can do better than giving me a ticket for the groceries, the officer approached me with her hand on her holster. My kids are up on the steps looking down. My wife is looking at me as well. I calmed down, surveilled the situation. I said, look, you can give me whatever ticket you need to give me. Give me your badge numbers, give me your information, and we'll fight this a legal way. But think about it. One bad reaction in that instance could have led to something completely different. One more smart comment, one more, why are you doing this to me? I'm innocent. It takes seconds for the interaction engagement between black men and cops for it to turn violent. And immediate, and you can not be walking home and seeing your kids, or you can be dead on the ground with a knee in your throat, in your neck. And that continues to play out. I just pray through all of this aggression that is taking place, we follow through. We cannot have another black man dead on a shirt and we just mention the name and we mention it in a timeline on the news, or we're having a conversation, or we're sick or tired of being tired. We need action. We need action steps. We need a plan to end this. We need more representation like us within the police force, police in our communities, if that's the case. Because I believe you don't know the community, and you don't know if that was a cop that was in that community and really serviced that community, they would have known him to be an advocate for the community, and it would have never went this way. It would have never got there. This was over a $20 bill that was supposed to be a fake $20 bill. You can get a fake $20 bill from the bank. You can get it from another grocery store. But you call the cops over a fake $20 bill that led to the loss of a life, that led to over 25 states protesting and rioting, that led to martial law. Just look at this. Just look at the timeline. And it continues to happen over and over again because of the aggression towards Black men.
But Richard, hold up, because I mean, you're talking about we can't lose another Black life. We have lost more Black lives since Floyd was killed. So I want us to highlight this because people, There are people being killed by police. They didn't take the fucking day off. They didn't take the week off. No, they still shooting at Black people, shooting at our allies and killing us. In case you have not heard, of course, we have seen a lot of the pictures coming out of Louisville, Kentucky in the uprising there in support of what happened to Breonna Taylor, the 26-year-old EMT who was shot 8 times in her own home by police looking for a person who did not live there. And her boyfriend returned fire. He was initially charged with attempted murder on a cop. Those charges were subsequently dropped. But yet another Black person in Louisville, Kentucky has been killed. His name is David McAtee. Let's take a look at some of the local coverage there, because this might send Louisville over the top once again.
A lot of reaction is coming in. That's where we stand here at 4 o'clock tonight. The shooting of a man who was known to feed people barbecue for free, including police officers in West Louisville, has rocked our community. Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Proffitt. Here's what we know. Last night, just after midnight, barbecue business owner David McAtee was with a group of people outside his business at 26th and Broadway, Dino's, outside a business there, when police and Kentucky National Guardsmen approached. In the video we're about to show you, recorded by Chris Smith, you will see the police attempting to break up the large crowd. One shot is fired. The chief says that came from somewhere in the crowd. Then the governor says both LMPD and the National Guard opened fire.
Go! Get in the car and leave. Let's go. I'm gone. As soon as I get my keys. Okay, there you go. That's all you had to say. Shots fired. Shots fired. Shots fired. Look, they all got their guns out. Shots fired. Shots fired.
That's the video from Chris Smith there, recorded. As you see, police were asking people to leave, and as Chris Smith was saying on his own video, they were going to leave. In fact, he was on his way out. Governor Beshear says there are multiple videos from body cameras of the shooting, and he was told Mayor Fisher to make the video available to the public so they can see whether there's justification or not.
Oh, but wait, it gets worse. So you heard what the anchor said there. I'm pretty sure that was from WHAS News 11 in Louisville. So you heard the news anchor say there that the governor there, Democratic governor Andy Beshear, was going to make the body cam video from Louisville Police and the Kentucky National Guard available. Oh, but there's a slight problem. Let's look at that.
It is unacceptable that the officers that responded last night did not have body cameras on and recording. This is the entire reason that we have those cameras.
Governor Andy Beshear says Mayor Greg Fisher made the right decision to fire LMPD Chief Steve Conrad.
I believe at this point that Chief Conrad, who's somebody I've known, and as a nice individual, it had to happen. It had to happen. 2 incidences of this significance, no body cameras. It had to happen.
But Beshear also says the investigation into Breonna Taylor's death on March 13th has taken too long.
It's unacceptable that Breonna Taylor's family has been apparently told it would take months to finish the rest of the investigation. I think the mayor needs to look really hard at the situations in the Breonna Taylor case.
He vowed not to let Kentucky State Police take too long on the David McAtee investigation.
Listen, I'm not going to interfere. I don't do that. But I am going to push and push to make sure that there is no delay because of our end. We've got to make sure that people get information, and that may mean that we provide updates along the way.
And says African American communities deserve better.
My hope is that we will see real, lasting societal change, and this isn't just another moment where we think it's.
That was from WLKY, the CBS affiliate there in Louisville. Panel, there's so much to unpack coming out of that story. Obviously, again, like I mentioned, Breonna Taylor, the woman shot and killed in her home. Now, David McAtee, a 53-year-old entrepreneur who operated a very successful barbecue joint, Yaya's Barbecue, in Louisville's West End. It's been reported that he would often give free food to the cops. He would feed the fucking cops. And in return, he was shot and killed no body cam, and his body, much to the anger of the community there in Louisville, his body was left in the street for 12 hours. 12 hours. 12 hours. I don't know who wants to go first. Go ahead.
Well, just to, also just like, because we've done a lot of reporting on the Breonna Taylor case, the police officers who stormed into her house executing allegedly a no-knock warrant were also not wearing body cameras. So there's no body camera. Just for people who don't know about the story, they were doing a series of no-knock warrants. Breonna Taylor was not a suspect. They banged on her door. According to a lawsuit filed by the family, they did not announce their police officers. They stormed in the house. Her boyfriend, fearing that it was like a home invasion, shot one of the police officers, and then they, shot back 24 times, killing her almost instantly. But they were not wearing body cameras also, which just shows you how policing just is really, insulated and almost impossible to reform on some level, because after this occurred, it was controversial because there were no body cameras. Now they have more officers killing people without body cameras. And it seems, I think, as a person who covers this topic quite a bit, I think to a certain extent, until there is some sort of national legislation or movement to disempower police unions or some of the institutions that bolster policing, you're not going to see change, because it's just unbelievable to think that they would not have body cameras during one controversial raid where they kill someone, and then suddenly 3 weeks later to be in exactly the same situation. It's just shows you how immune policing is to reform.
I mean, I'm sorry, Lisa, go ahead, because I was kind of dismayed by the naivete of the governor there. I can't believe it's taking so long. Sir, you understand that these are Black people, right? You know what I mean? There's no urgency. The police are not in a rush to investigate themselves in the killing of another N-word. That's not their priority. But I'm sorry, Lisa, go ahead with your comment.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say I don't really get to do much reporting about Baltimore anymore because I'm working here. One of the last things that I did report out was a gentleman who was shot and killed by Baltimore police. They were showing up for a domestic violence call. They believed the man had a gun. He didn't have a gun, but they shot and killed him. And police at that press conference the police did have their body cameras on, but what they released to the press was an edited account of what the body camera footage was. So even that, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. So there's people were warning when there was kind of this big push for body cameras a few years ago that this is not going to be the solution. And, I think the thing that I witnessed, what we're seeing right here, a lot of what Stephen is talking about, which is a really great point about the power of police unions, all of that is why this really is, it's not a quick fix at all. And I also want to add, before I cede my time, my square, is it's really important that, we were talking about the death of Black men, and that's so important. But when we look at even the way that we transition from that last story to this latest death, is that we cannot forget the deaths of Black women that happen at the hands of police. We can't forget the deaths of non-binary people, members of the LGBTQ community. All of those get wrapped up in this, and we want to make sure that we lift up every single body, every single person, every single life that is right now suffering under all of this.
Richard, I have to kind of echo Stephen Janis's point here, because I don't really see how police can be reformed at this point. We, the community, have been trying to work with them, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. For example, in engendering them to use body cameras. So these types of incidents will be caught on camera, but joke's on us if they don't turn the body cameras on. Then it's sort of a useless thing, and it's an opportunity for the police to further insulate themselves from consequence when they do wrong, brutalize, murder, and or worse. And this guy knew the cops, Rich. I mean, at this point, the cops got to go.
Well, I would say it's blatant. It's blatant watching that. It angers me knowing that for body cams since 2015, 2016, each state has had where they implemented grants for these body cams. So now when I sit back and see one of the highest officials in the state finally making the decision to fire when the police, those police officers and their districts have not met the operational guidelines for police using a body cam ever. So we're now reacting to the issue. But we also have to look at if you're going to remove, you have to have some form of agenda and what you're going to put back in the place of it. And we have to think through that. We haven't been included in this last experiment here, this last police experiment here, but how are we included? How are we a part of what that looks like going forward? And when if you remove a whole system in general, how do you change it? How do you change that system? Because the violence is just begetting violence. And if you don't have something in between, we don't have a solid plan behind that, it's just going to continue. It's just going to continue. So we have to have some form, like we're not at the table enough. We're not represented enough to even, I can't even say reform. You got to be included to be reformed. You know, the whole agenda has to be inclusive of you to be reformed. But we're not even at the table to even go through any form of reform. So if we're going to break down the system as it is and build up a new system, what does that look like? You know, how is it equitable? How is it equitable? How do we prevent this from going forward? And I guess that's the answers that we the people have to come up with, not just the people we vote into law. We have to play an integral role in how we develop these new processes. How do we prevent the killings, the continued killings, to stop? And I just think we just need to really, if we're breaking down the system, I'm saying not if we're going to, because the system is currently, as we speak, being broken down. How do we change? How do we create a new? What does that look like to prevent this? Because you can create a new system and have the same issues. So how do we change? And I guess that's the question. That's the debates. That's the conversations we're having here.
Well, I definitely think that defunding the police has got to be a top priority, because the police are sucking up way too much money relative to what the fuck they contribute to the community, right? Because we're seeing these cops out there with these tanks, these all this crazy shit, right? Armed to the fucking teeth. Meanwhile, nurses are having to put on garbage bags as personal protective gear in order to treat people with COVID-19 during a pandemic. We are funding people who are turning their guns on us. And that has got to stop. And shout out to Reclaim the Block out there in Minneapolis. They posted something on their Twitter page today that there's a meeting amongst elected officials happening today in Minneapolis, where there is a proposal that is being given some serious consideration to remove school resource officers from the public schools there, and also reallocating, I think it was about $1 million from the police budget into other places. So, you know, when we continually defund our children in public education, we continually defund public health, but we make sure that the cops are armed to the teeth, you know, so they can shoot rubber bullets at us when we take to the streets and exercise our constitutional rights. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of solutions already out there, but I wanted to move along because there was another incident that happened where it wasn't police this time who killed this young person, but it was a white bar owner. And this comes out of Omaha, Nebraska. It's about James Scurlock. Let's take a look.
Deadly encounter started with 2 shoves. Videos indicate the father of bar owner Jake Gardner pushed a protester. Then someone knocked the 68-year-old man back about 10 feet.
I was hoping and praying to God that no one would pull a gun out and do something, and it happened.
Klein says he can't make decisions on emotion, only evidence, and he says the videos tell the story.
Mr. Garner, as we know now, I said I did what I did to defend myself. And we find that we can't disprove that from the evidence that we have.
Klein breaks down the events with the videos. After that push, Klein says Jake Gardner showed his weapon. That's what got the attention of 19-year-old Elena Melendez.
As soon as I hear there's a gun, I run over.
In the video, you can see Melendez grab Gardner from behind and tackle him. She says she was trying to keep Gardner, in the gray t-shirt, from firing that weapon.
And as soon as I pulled him to the ground, people gathered around us, and he got his hand, positioned in a way, and then just shot.
Klein says Gardner said he fired 2 warning shots. In the video, Scurlock, in the black t-shirt, can be seen leaping from the curb onto Gardner's back. Scurlock places Gardner in a chokehold.
So you can hear the bar owner, when he's got Mr. Spurlock on top of him, saying, "Get off me, get off me, please get off me," whatever, many times, and then the shots fired.
18 seconds after Scurlock jumped and the pair of warning shots, Klein says Gardner pointed his gun back over his shoulder and shot Scurlock in the chest.
It was the very last shot that got him, that killed him.
Melendez believes Gardner had every intention of using his gun even before the fight with Scurlock. She points to a Facebook post Gardner wrote an hour before the shooting. Just when you think, what else could 2020 throw at me? Then you have to pull 48 hours of military-style fire watch. Melendez says as a person of color, she had no choice but to try to help.
It didn't matter if I lost my life that night. I should have helped them, and I did.
It's a senseless death, a loss of a young man's life that, of course, should have never happened.
That report from Michelle Nander, ABC 7KE TV in Omaha, Nebraska. Stephen Janis, we see this really time and time again. The case of Ahmaud Arbery is kind of an anomaly in a way that the people that shot and killed him are actually facing charges. But in the case of James Scurlock, his killer will not face charges. And what jumped out to me about the story, isn't there something called a proportionate use of force? I understand that the man might have been in a headlock, but the fact that he was able to, reach for his gun, reach over his shoulder and shoot and not be charged with anything, that strikes me as unusually fucked up.
Well, I think it points to a contrast when these type of things happen, because just for example, in the Breonna Taylor case, right, her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, in a state with a stand your ground law, fires a single shot, because someone's breaking into his house and he's African American, and he was charged with, attempted murder of a police officer only after outcry, because it was, because people were saying, hey, he was a legal gun owner, he had a gun, he was in his own domicile. Someone broke in, he shot him, and they immediately charged him. They went to a grand jury and charged him. And then that same police chief we're talking about who got fired later admitted that the officers excluded information from the grand jury purposely that led the grand jury to indict him. And the prosecutor of, Louisville prosecutor actually asked for those charges to be dropped. So there is a double standard in this case. And I think it's stark right there. You can see it, in those two cases. If you compare them side by side, it's completely evident that it was, no one could, he was not given the same rights to defend himself.
Lisa, these extrajudicial killings where Black people are killed by non-members of law enforcement, but at the same time, they're afforded the protection of whiteness and white supremacy and the benefit of the legal system here in the United States, where, for a very long time in this country, it was not illegal to kill a Black person at all. And it appears as though into the 21st century, that is still very much the case.
It might have been if they were property, you might have gotten in trouble with their owner. But it's very rare to see people brought to justice for killing us. I don't know.
Yeah, and the fact that it was caught on camera doesn't really seem to make a difference here, Richard. I'm very much, a gun rights advocate, believe it or not. I definitely believe in my Second Amendment right to self-defense, but I do understand that it comes with limits. And, you just can't go around shooting people. If somebody comes and punches me in the face, I can't shoot them and expect to, walk away. But I guess I don't have the complexion for the protection in that kind of instance.
Yes, I'm with Lisa. It continues to be, you're speechless. You see it over and over again. The laws are not equitable for us. And you constantly see people get away with, ravaging our bodies, taking us away, taking our life. So I'm speechless. Just another example.
I'm sorry, gang. I didn't mean to bring everybody further down, but I did want to lift up the names of James Scurlock and David McAtee because they may not be getting national attention, but please believe that there are still people out here past George Floyd, past Breonna Taylor, past Ahmaud Arbery. Unfortunately, that list of names, it just keeps getting longer. And, the system doesn't really care how pissed off we are or how many of us take to the streets. They are going to keep going by the standard operating procedure. And that is, shoot blacks the first chance you get, if you get a chance. Gang, before we wrap up, I wanted to remind everybody that if you want to reach out to us directly, you can do so. You can email us, stircrazy@therealnews. And we did get a couple of emails because we have a couple of viewers and we appreciate our couple of viewers reaching out to us from time to time. Shout out to Emily. Emily sent us an email. I'm going to read this out loud. I don't know if we can put it up on the screen or not. But she goes, hey, Stir Crazy. I find great relief in watching your network, and I'm so grateful for the work that you do. My only concern is lack of perspective I find on your panel sometimes. Right now, I'm watching the protests with great hope as well as fear and anticipation. I know what's going on isn't just about George Floyd, but I also know it isn't just about police brutality. Black people, young people, women, and the poor have had their human rights violated and stripped away for centuries. And it's been bad for the past decade. We can't make rent. We can't get health care. We can't afford food. We can't make a living wage. We are bogged down by domestic abuse and sexual violence. We are seeing the sexualization of children increasing. We are seeing the sexual objectification of women increasing. And wait, I lost my place. Sorry. Civil rights. We are also seeing women and girls' civil rights protections being stripped away. She's right. We want liberation, not equality. We want a government that isn't sex trafficking, war machine, gambling ring. She's not wrong there. We want liberation. So it irks me to see the conversation stay limited to the idea of equality. I don't want to be like my oppressors. I don't want to be equal to them. I want a better country with human rights and justice. This is not about equality. It is about liberation. I hope you will share this perspective with your audience. And we have. So Emily, we appreciate you reaching out. And panel, I want to kick that to y'all because I can recall, seeing a study, and I should have looked it up so I could reference it specifically. But it's going to take something like 173 years for women to be paid equal to men. I don't know if that number is 100% accurate. And I will look this up and reference this on tomorrow's show so y'all don't think I'm just pulling stuff out my ass. I'm not. No, I read this somewhere. Okay, it's going to take a bunch of generations for women to have parity with men when it comes to salaries. And that's just one example of how equality is so far down the road. Most of us will never see it, especially if you're on the wrong side of the demographic scale. Lisa, talk to me about equality versus liberation. What does liberation look/sound like to you?
I appreciate that letter from Emily so much. Emily, thank you for writing. I think the thing that I thought about is a piece that I wrote a few years ago about a Black-led kind of organizing activist protest group here in Baltimore that had been, the leader of which had been accused of rape and sexual assault. And so what happens, I think, sometimes is that Black people want to be like white people. I think that sometimes we want that power, but we don't want the equity. So I think what needs to happen is what Emily was saying. It's not just that we want access to that power as well, because then we can turn into the same thing. We can be as dangerous for other people, deadly as other people, hoarding resources, like we see what happens in the way the world exists right now. But we need to be better than that and want something that actually is centered on making sure that everybody's good, if that makes sense. I feel like I rambled a lot just now.
Stephen, what is your take on equality versus liberation?
Well, I mean, I think in some sense, just listening to the email, that she is referencing to a certain extent the role that policing plays in inequality. Not to stray too far from the topic, but she seemed to be talking about that, and I think that's something that's not acknowledged as much in this debate, because you look at cities like Minneapolis that spend 40% of their budget on policing. Baltimore spends twice as much on policing as as education, and we've done many stories about how billions of dollars are set aside for police pensions, making cities like Baltimore practically broke. And the fact that policing is so powerful only makes inequality worse. I mean, the war on drugs, so many stories that I've covered where police have ruined the lives of people, where our over-aggressive policing has put people in horrible economic situations, zero tolerance, things like that. I think to a certain extent, that has to be acknowledged hand in hand when we talk about policing, and understanding that the way policing is situated in this country is it often becomes a mechanism for inequality, for economic inequality, and enforcing boundaries, that create more inequality.
Richard, I'll let you have the last word. Emily, again, I couldn't agree with more than with what you said. Equality versus liberation, Rich. What does it mean for you and yours to be liberated rather than to be equal?
I would say to be liberated more since I'm in the business world, is more entrepreneurship opportunities, the ability for minorities, low to moderate income, LGBTQ, just to have that opportunity to be able to create your own. I think that's where the equality starts. Many times we don't have the ability to make our own, create our own economy. So if you can't create your own economy, then you're not donating to the campaigns and getting the elected officers you want into the office. You're not getting the chiefs you want into office. So everything that's being given to you, or not even given to you, everything that's placed in office, you have no control, you have no influence over. So I think right there, as I started in business, I want to end, if I think about liberation, that's what's going to liberate us. The ability to create our own economy, create our own business, at a high level. It's not just good enough to create a business and not thriving industry. And recycling our dollar back within our community. They say, the black dollar stays in the black community for 6 hours, as compared to our counterparts is 22 days. I said, so we need to get to that point, and liberate ourselves and go from there, and really strip away from there. I think we need to get back to the point of where we're creating our own. And as I talk about this, I think about how when we tried this Black Wall Street, the Black Wall Street experiment, how then again, we were under attack. We came under attack, but I think we need to go back and continue to create our own economy and keep up with that experiment, because it was right there. And then we need to create some infrastructure around that so we can liberate ourselves. Because I think too much that we're interdependent on a system that's been against us from the beginning.
Listen, this is what I say. Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. And I'm being cheeky about it because, who said that? Was that Wallace, George Wallace? Was that particular saltine who got up there and said that with his whole chest? But here's the funny thing about that, though. A lot of us economically and in general, our state of community was in better shape when we were segregated and thriving. I mean, we segregated right now and not thriving. So if we could resume the segregation and the economic machine within the Black community and Black communities across this country, to start cranking itself back up. But that's going to be made even harder by the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent economic downturn that all of us are in, which we know impact Black, brown, and indigenous first and foremostly, and worst mostly. So we definitely have a large mountain to climb here. But I'm telling you, don't knock segregation. Segregation looked kind of fun back in the day. My mama told me that no, she didn't get called a nigger. She grew up in West Baltimore in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. She didn't get called the N-word until she left her segregated, insulated area. Like, everybody wasn't getting called the N-word all willy-nilly back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. You did when you left your community to go out and handle your business out in the mainstream. But we knocked segregation. Segregation wasn't all that terrible. But gang, we have completely run out of time. Oh, go ahead, Lisa. You got a comment. Hop in there. Go ahead.
I was gonna squeeze in that. Like, yeah, the problem was never us in our communities. The problem was that whiteness could come through and kick all that over at any given time, which, as Richard said, has also happened. So that's like what we need to address. Leave us alone.
Yes.
Leave us alone.
We just minding our business. Look, Black Wall Street, they was thriving, dog. They was just minding their business. But hey, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I can't say what I really want to say, but so I'm gonna leave it right there. I'd like to thank our panel for joining us today. Stephen Janis, don't forget, you guys, Police Accountability Reports comes on live right here on our YouTube channel every Thursday. Lisa Snowden-McCray and Richard Snow. Rich, we appreciate you being here. Gang, that's our time. Thank you very much for watching Stir Crazy. We will see you tomorrow. Email us, stircrazy@therealnews.com.